Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be redesigning the Disney Fairies, but a movie series edition, in contrast to last year's video where for February I did a redesign of 8 of the Pixie Hollow Book Series characters, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in that side of the universe as well. But focusing on today's video, I'm going to be designing Rosetta, Fawn, Tinkerbell, Iridessa, Lizzy, Silvermist, Vidia, and Queen Clarion to keep with the same amount of number as I did last year. I didn't grow up with the movie series. I was of the age demographic more towards the books, and by the time the movies came around, I was a bit aged out of it. But I decided to watch all the movies while doing my redesign series last year, and I wanted to go ahead and do a little follow-up to that because I really enjoyed specifically The Great Fairy Rescue. It felt very magical and whimsical, and Lizzy is such good representation for child of neglect who turns to fantasy escapism, so of course I had to include her. It was also so fun getting to see all the different takes on old characters and be introduced to a new cast of characters as well. And of course it's always fun to see these characters brought to life with voice actors and animation. I, of course, as always, don't intend this to be like, oh, the originals are bad or I have problems with them. I think they're perfectly well suited for the purpose of the animation. I simply want to draw them in my own style, my own take, and that is incredibly greebled. So let's get started. So starting off with Rosetta here, since she is pink and I'm going in color wheel order, I wanted to give her a stocky, curvy body type. I felt like it fit her very dramatic, romantic personality. And for her mood board, I wanted to go with something that was sort of old money, inspired with lots of floral and classy elements to it. For the first look, I was inspired by that tight dress that had almost sort of petal texture to it. For the second, I wanted to go with something that had almost a 1950s silhouette with the very tight little sunglasses and poofy skirt. Then for the third look, I went very Jackie Kennedy, since that's very American icona for what a classy, glamorous style is. For the fourth image, I was inspired by sort of derby hats and just southern extravagance in terms of elegant dress. And for the fifth look, I wanted to go really fairy tale magical. And then I take all those little thumbnail sketches and I combine them into my final design. And I just write down my favorite little elements of each. This is how I do all of my redesigns, and ever since I started doing this process, I really noticed an improvement in my eye for like fashion design. So it was really fun. So I ended up going with this picnic table shawl, since I wanted to really focus on the scale, that they are 5 inches tall. So it also has these really oversized buttons and these giant flowers, but in reality they would be quite tiny. Another detail I wanted to add is giving them all different shaped wings and antenna and little claws, because I intended to do that last year and oops, I forgot. So her antennae are based off of bumblebees, and she is a garden fairy. And likewise, her wings are shaped like a rose and a petal as well. For her color palette, I wanted to do a lot of hot pink and magenta balanced with reds and some earthy greens to match the sepal of the rose stem on the edge of her dress. For her top, I wanted it to be 2 petals with little floral, lacy, petal-like embellishments at the top, with a corset vibe down the center of it to bring in a bit more earthy elements. And I wanted to also give her a pearl necklace, since it's a very classy lady, but since she's a fairy, it's like super oversized. And speaking of oversized, I also wanted to play with that scale with her bag that is in reality like a minuscule chain, but on her it would look huge, since it's almost sort of a messenger purse, it is literally a little wax sealed miniature envelope. For her facial structure, I did base it off of Kristen Chenoweth because I really loved her performance as Rosetta. Iconic. And the hair I had a lot of fun with. It's sort of like half almost beehive and very swoopy, and I had a lot of fun with this series because I also wanted to push the semi-non-human skin tones. So all of the fairies have a lot of unnaturally colored undertones in their skin, and Rosetta's is pink. And I also used a lot of indigo to shade the magentas and reds, so that way it is a nice contrast between warm and cool tones in her palette. I also gave her some little gloves that are fingerless so her claw tips can be showing, and I really like how her heels came out too. They have these huge roses on the top of them, and the heels are little rose thorns. I really enjoy designing for her like hyper feminine aesthetic that is very like classy and pink and loud, and the silhouette really reminds me of Gerard Way's secretary outfit. Subconscious influence, but definitely similar vibes between these two queens. I had a lot of fun with Rosetta. She was the first one I colored, and speaking of coloring, I measure the time for these with the recording time and the coloring time, but I don't have the data for sketching and line work time since I do that traditionally in pencil and for my sketches, and then inking over it with some microns and then scanning those into color digitally, since all my art's a little bit of a fusion between traditional and digital. I simply prefer the texture of paper and sketchbooks. But given that, the total time spent digitally on Rosetta was 2 hours, 34 minutes, and 15 seconds, which was the second fastest time overall. For the background, I'm using a picture of roses I took while in Wilmington, North Carolina, so they're very coastal and beachy looking and very nice light pink to complement her very strong saturated magenta. Then my favorite part, of course, adding all the glitter and her glow, which I also wanted to have the glow match the fairy colors.
Yeah, no, I don't really do mud.
But you're a garden fairy!
Ironic, isn't it?
So here is the reveal. I hope you can enjoy all the little details into this. I'm really happy with how she turned out. I love how glittery and pink and high femme and dramatic she looks. I really love the silhouette most of all, since I definitely wanted to focus on silhouette and pose in this project. But be sure to let me know what you guys think. So moving on to Fawn, I wanted her mood board to be very masculine, very, I don't know if there's a word for this specific style, but practical and foresty, very wilderness chic. So for her body type, I wanted her to be very muscular and athletic and looking like someone who has almost sort of a lumberjack build. So for the first look, I went with this big furry leaf jacket that's very geometric and sharp, while the second one I did a more rounded silhouette with this knitted turtleneck dress. For the third, I wanted it to be almost a little bit western, so it has this big leaf shawl and a big hat. For the fourth, I went very pixie with tight curled up hair and this big feather strap and bag. And then for the fifth look, even more pixie with a little acorn hat and freckles, little bob and everything, and different animal feeds in a bag. So again, just combining all these looks into one, I ended up going with the angular leaf jacket, but shortening it to keep the look even more practical. And I really love the texture of the leaf jacket, and it mirrors nicely because for her wings, I wanted it to be little animal paws for the top wings and leaves on the bottom. To keep in line with how I was playing with scale and Rosettas, I also chose to do the same in Fawn's. So her leaf jacket has these big visible stitches, and the feathers on her shoulder are huge. And speaking of the feathers, to mimic that striped pattern, I also wanted to give her these bark bracers made of birch that mimic the stripes on the feathers to sort of keep the outfit cohesive. I also wanted to do some geometric patterns and some knitwear, since fairy size doesn't preclude them making their own knit items, and I wanted to add some visual interest to her piece as well to keep all the sharp angles very intense to give her a very masculine, forest, active look. For her hair, I wanted to keep in and reference how she has big, long, braided hair in the original. So for this look, to keep it shorter and tighter and more practical while still keeping the braids, I chose to separate them into two and have them curled up into little space buns on the side with her iconic swoopy bangs. I also wanted to give her freckles and some orange undertone in her blush to give her a cute little look that feels very pixie and whimsical. I also gave her this really big messenger bag that she's wearing across her chest with another big oversized string to play with scale, but I figured it would be handy for, I headcanon her as having a job later on once she sort of, okay, I can explain. I have a lot of headcanons, as I am prone to do. Whenever I watch something, I take notes, I come up with how I would do something, redesigning, rewriting, etc. Really just like how I consume any piece of media is always just through a filter of what I would do. I literally have an almost 7,000 word document of Pixie Hollow what I would do if I was given the series. And for Fawn, I headcanon her as sort of becoming like a field biologist slash veterinarian once she moves on from being the leader of the animal talent fairies, so that bag would be handy there. Moving on back to the redesign, to the topic at hand, if you will. I wanted her pants to be really simple since the leaf top and the geometric sweater have a lot of detail on them, so I wanted the pants to be just solid gray, very practical tacticals, ripped skinned knees, and to have just a little bit of ribbon detailing, so they're still interesting visually, but not so much that it's distracting or overcrowding this very textural pattern design. To tie into the patterns, I also wanted to give her some moccasins that have little fringe on them and more of that diamond geometric pattern to tie back to all of the harsh shapes of the leaves in the knitting. I also wanted the heels to be a little pebble. For her color palette, I went with the main color being this almost neon orange with lots of sort of burnt umber and rich reds undertones to keep it earth toned, but very like fiery and bright and vibrant. I also had a lot of fun drawing her in a floaty, flying pose. Since that was something I wanted to change since last year, I literally forgot that they could fly. I just drew them standing. How boring. There you can see I set it to black and white for a moment because I wanted to play with the levels because I felt like it was a little bit too monochromatic and that the values weren't different enough to set things apart. For the background, I'm using a photo of two deer that I took at a state park in Virginia, sort of peeking through the trees, so they're in the background, keeping her very small like she's in between the branches hiding there. Adding just a pinch of fairy dust glitter, and now here is the reveal. I'm so happy with how she came out. I really love the little pixie curl on her shoes and the very flamboyant feathers contrasting with her very masculine practical look. Love her. Now moving on to Tinkerbell. Since I already redesigned her last year, I'm using the same base body type, which is very muscular since she is a blacksmith essentially. So with the first outfit design here, I wanted to keep it very simple since I had canon the movies as taking place before the book series, so I wanted her look to be a bit more natural and flowy than my redesign from last year. So for the first look, just a very classic Tink look. The second one, I wanted to do an apron, goggles, very workshop. For the third look, it almost gave kind of Bobble to me with a very oversized glasses sort of look. And for the final look, I did a lot of corsetry and tight like leather pieces and this big gear button like hat situation, helmet slash hat thing. I really loved it and I ended up going with it. So using the same color palette from last year's piece for the sake of consistency, I have her hair in a bob, just like she did on the arrival day in the movie series. And of course, she has to have a big bell on her somewhere, so a little tiny jingle bell as a necklace that is extremely huge on her. I wanted to give her this grassy one-piece undersuit with a corset that has these very stylized gold buckles on it because I wanted to incorporate a lot of metalwork into her redesign and lots of warm leather to really get that blacksmith metalwork Tinker Fairy vibe across. Also, a fun little detail is that in my redesign from last year, she has mismatch gloves, and in this design, she has matching pairs, since it is before she lost the other one. Also wanted her to have a skirt over the one piece that has these little gears and contrasting leather colors with little pieces of sea glass that are a nice bright green grassy color in the center of each gear. I also wanted to mimic that leather cut-out look from the skirt on some knee pads for her, with these big thigh-high socks, and are the arms of a little pocket watch. For her shoes, I wanted them to be little leaves with, of course, some little puffs of cotton at the end that match the yellow of the gear hat and the jingle bell and her socks. And for the heel, they're little tiny pieces of spring. I really enjoyed incorporating metal, and specifically my favorite place that I did that was on the strap for her purse, where it is a twisted piece of metal that I add some sort of like rust look to it. I really love painting rust. And I especially love her palette overall. I really love the sort of copper green and reds in her palette. Very metallic, very earthy. I think it's a very fun combination. One thing I struggled with in this piece is the pose, because I wanted to have a lot more fun with the poses this year, and it's not that I had trouble drawing her in this pose, it's that I'm constantly fighting the instinct to have them like showing off the fashion that I designed them in. I also really love how the like red undertones in her hair came out, and yet it still looks like blonde in the context of the piece. Really fun. And of course, she has to have her dagger on her. The total time for Tink's redesign was 2 hours, 53 minutes, and 57 seconds, which was actually the median time of this whole project. I really loved painting all of these little details in the metal, and I especially enjoyed on the little box, painting all of this miniature wood grain texture that sort of magically grows around the little sea glass port window into her toolbox. I also wanted to give her an expression where she's blowing her bangs out of her face, sort of prompting her to, in the future, start wearing her hair pulled up. Another little detail is that the leather cutouts on her knee pads sort of mimic pots and pans shape in reference to her talent. And in the same way, her wings are also hammer-shaped and pan-shaped. Here, her claws are tucked into her gloves, and her antennae are just two straight little lines, very cute, very pixie, very subtle insect-likeness. For the background, I wanted to use a picture of a tea kettle, since I remember I was a kid having this place set where her house was like this big kettle and you like unfolded it. Of course, I have to add a nice yellow golden glow to her, and now it's time for the reveal.
It's a horseless carriage. And do you want to know how it works?
Not really.
So do I.
I really love how she turned out. I really like how her hair came out, surprisingly. And I also am a big fan of the balance between feminine, fashionable aesthetics and very practical workwear, and steampunk is really just right down the middle of those two vibes, and it's so perfect for her, and I can definitely see why they were inclined to go that direction. But be sure to let me know what you guys think of this icon down in the comments below. Next up is Iridessa. For her mood board, starting out, I wanted to do something that was business casual with lots of neon yellows and light, loose, flowy, airy clothing. For her first look, I wanted to focus on a lot of rounded shapes, and in contrast with the second, I wanted to do a lot more sharp lines that emphasize the anxiety of her character. For the third look, I did something that was almost sort of 1920s in silhouette with a drop waist. No reason, just thought it would look nice on her character. For the fourth look, I wanted to do something that was business casual with more focus on the casual, something that's almost sort of athleisure-esque. And for the fifth look, I did something that was almost sort of 70s, that fit that sort of sunflower, flowery vibe. For her body type, I wanted a very dramatic silhouette, something that was very expressive to fit the high emotional intensity of her character. For her wings, I wanted them to mimic the rays of the sun, so the top ones are little sunshines and the bottom ones are little rainbow clouds, since canonically she can create and manipulate rainbows, which is also where I was getting that sort of 70s vibe from. I also wanted to give her a firefly antennae because she's a light fairy and lightning bugs would be so perfect for her. Keeping in with the light theme, I also wanted to give her these bright, neon, unnatural, golden yellow eyes, and I also wanted to give her some glasses, since she is a sort of bookish character, or is supposed to be in the first draft of the film franchise, and I wanted to harken back to that in her vibe and silhouette. For her hair, I wanted to keep that glitter in her hair that they had in the movies because I thought that was really clever, and just turn it into a sun-shaped afro with a little metal coil to act as the hair tie. I wanted to incorporate lots of little metallic shiny details throughout her outfit, so she's got the metal hair tie, glasses, little coil bracelets on each hand, and a big metal gold necklace. I also wanted her to have this really dramatic rainbow-colored scarf, again, to tie into her powers, and to give her outfit a lot of color and flow and movement. For her shoes, I wanted them to be little sunflower seed sandals with these cute little loosely metallic knit socks. And to match the sunflower seed shoes, I wanted her to have a knit top that sort of has the same colors and texture look as a seed. I also wanted to give her seed buttons down the front of her dress that has these big sort of blazer collars that are sunshine shaped to give that sharpness to her look, that anxiety, while having mostly rounded shapes in these big lantern sleeves with a delicate, dainty, dropped waist and big, flowing, loose, curvy pleats. I also wanted her to have big, spiky ears, because another little fun detail was give them all unique shaped ears. And I wanted hers to match her wings and the spikes and the rays of the sun. A fun aspect of this redesign was that last year I redesigned Fira, and she is another light talent fairy, and this year for Iridessa, the two characters, despite being the same talent, are so completely different in vibe to me, even though they both have that nervous leader quality. To me, they're just very separate and different in their personalities, and I had a lot of fun designing completely different aesthetics that have some similar shared aspects of gold metal weaved in throughout their outfits, along with structural metal pieces throughout the outfit to reflect lights with their metallicness. Iridessa's total redesign time was 2 hours, 38 minutes, and 17 seconds, which is on the lower end of redesign times, as with this one in particular, I wanted to keep it fairly simple. For the background, I used a photo of a rainbow I took, and then turned the saturation way up since rainbows are quite faint when photographed from a distance. So a little bit of movie magic to help tighten that up, and a little bit of neon yellow glow, and of course, a metric ton of pixie dust glitter on the final parts of this piece. And now it is time for Iridessa's reveal.
Okay, what can I teach you that's gonna do the least amount of damage?
I'm really happy with how she turned out overall. I love her sunny, summery vibes, and I really wish I could see like this Iridessa design animated. Like, I don't know, I'm really happy with the simplicity of it. I feel like I often over-greeble my designs, and I love how clear and sunny and light her design is. She has sort of like art teacher vibes to me. But be sure to let me know what you guys think. As always, I love hearing from you guys. Moving on to Lizzy now, I was so excited to get to have an excuse to do historical fashion in this project because I love researching history through fashion, and specifically the 1910s. I actually just did a project for back in October with my witches piece, which you can see if you follow me on Instagram at mercreatureguy549. But I wanted her mood board to be specifically based off of 1910s English children's clothing, and it has a lot of militaristic Great War influence in it. So lots of buttons, lots of buckles, lots of sharp silhouettes, army-esque hats, the whole 9 yards on miniature scale. And the reason I chose this period, and the reason why this period is also referenced in the movie, is because of the inspiration of the Cottingley Fairies case, which I encourage you to look into. You can see them on the mood board there. So for her outfit, I wanted to incorporate the flower crowns from those iconic British photos, and have them go over a military-style hat. And I also wanted her to have a big blazer, lots of layers in her skirts, little stockings, etc. I chose her theme color to be a seafoam green, since a green color was missing from this lineup's palette. I also looked up vintage magnifying glasses for this, because I really wanted her to have that kid explorer vibe. I picture her to be about 9 years old. I don't ever draw kids though, so let me know if this reads as a child or not. I tried my best. For her hair, I wanted them to be these dark brown ringlets, and her have gap teeth and missing a tooth as well. I wanted her to have that big open flowing 1910s blazer with a little dragonfly pin on it, which is specifically based off of a vintage pin that I have that has been passed down to me from my grandmama. Rest in peace. I also wanted her little buttons there to have sort of wing-like shapes, and the dress that she's wearing under the blazer on top to have this big, very heavy buckle and these studded pockets, again, because a lot of children's fashion at that time, and fashion in general, but even with kids' fashion, it was often inspired by the military. Children's fashion in this time was mostly white, but they were starting to get some fun colors in, so I went with that light-colored overdress and a earthy plaid underdress to bring in the brown from her skin and her hair to match the pants and the warmth of the magnifying glass, so her palette is nice and cohesive. The white dress also has on the sleeves some more gold buttons that bring in that metallic, harsh edge to the otherwise sort of naturalistic, flowy, earthy vibes of this outfit. I also really wanted to focus in on that historical element because the Cottingley Fairies case is suspected to have gotten as big and as popular as it was because of the time period and place it was in. Think of where Britain was in World War I, and the idea of having a naturalist return to the magical past, quite literally, with fairies and magic and elves, etc., is very tempting when you are in a war and the industrial age is encroaching and has been for a long time. It can be especially easy for children in stressful situations like war to then turn to magical escapist outlooks, and I think having that very bleak human world outlook in contrast to the magical fairy Neverland world is a very ripe setting for an isekai style story, if you will. Obviously, I know why they didn't do this. A dark period drama that is about children escapism. It's something that has a very niche demographic among the children they were marketing to, I imagine. But I really love how this redesign turned out. I really love, again, looking at history through fashion because so much of the world is reflected in it in such a big microcosm. The background picture is of Gnomeville in Forks, Washington, and the total redesign time was 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 34 seconds, which was the shortest redesign time.
I wish I were a fairy, just like you.
And here's the reveal. I'm very happy with how she turned out. I think she looks darling in her little outfit. And I really like how the background, fits perfectly with that. Complete coincidence. I didn't even have that in mind until after I was like, oh, what do I need for the background? Oh, I know, Gnomeville. But yeah, I think she totally deserved to escape and be turned into a fairy by magic. It's what she deserved. It's what she wanted. Free my girl from her shit dad. Next up is Silvermist, and anyone who knows me even the slightest will not be surprised that this ended up being my favorite redesign of all. Starting off with her mood board, it is primarily photos by Elizabeth Elder on Instagram. I really love their photography style. The energy of nymphs and naiads that they capture was exactly what I wanted to do for Silvermist. For Silvermist, I wanted her to have a really long and lanky body and have very loose flowing fashions. So for the first look, it's just a lot of drapery. The second one has a lily pad hat that I really love, and I will go into more detail later. The third look was very fishy with these algae capes and these wrapped grass leggings. And the fourth look was very more mermaidy with a little seashell top and pearls in her hair. And the fifth look was, I imagined her having this big conch hat, but I did end up going back to the lily pad hat, which is something that I first saw done by Whitney Pollitt when she did the original first character concepts for Silvermist in Disney many, many years ago, and I really love that, so I of course had to reference it in this piece. Moving on to her outfit, I wanted to keep it more a sort of loose amalgamation of fabrics than any specific clothing pieces. So around her neck she has these shoulder drapery of these riverside grasses, and her top is a combination of smooth river stones, fish scales, grass, and some flowy, watery looking fabric. For her skirt, I had a lot of fun with it because the train mimics a waterfall, and I also really liked choosing the different colors for the gradients there. For her wings and her little tiny antenna, I wanted them to be based off of damselflies because they are very iconic waterside insects, IMO. And her ears, I wanted her to have big frilly fish ears. For her undertones, I wanted it to be very blue and green, in contrast to these sort of pink highlights of her skin to give her that very water creature sort of aesthetic. Back to her outfit, I wanted her sleeves to be a combination of sleeves and a wrap. So they're very flowy, very illogical, and her hair wanted to have this sort of crimped, curly texture to it, which was a lot of fun to draw. I also wanted it to be divided into bangs, some little wavy curls at the side, a big curl down the back, and a little bun in the back wrapped around with some pearls into the hat. the lily pad also has a little flower of white willow sticking out of it because that is another riverside plant. I definitely wanted her to give fresh water vibes. Her skirt at the top also has a little teeny tiny conch shell because I really like that even though it is like fairy sized, it still looks like how it would for a human because conch shells just come really tiny. And she doesn't have any shoes at all, just some reed wrappings around her calves because I wanted her to be very in touch with nature. She also has a tiny pearl ring and a tiny flower ring on the other hand for symmetry. I had a lot of fun with this pose. I like how flowy it is, and of course I really love doing colors that are cool tones, and I love painting green. I didn't really ever think about it until I started doing Monster High Redesign series, and it was like, oh wait, everyone's green now, and this case applies here. I also wanted her to have some dark indigo lipstick and some bright green eyes with blue pupils instead of black to enhance that sort of fishy vibe that she has going on. I really love how mystical and mythical she looks and how she turned out in this piece. I feel like her lanky frame and her pose and all the flowing fabrics really enhance that. John William Waterhouse style painting of my Silvermist redesign a win. I also gave her blue wings and little highlights of yellow at the end, since that was referenced in a lot of her designs throughout the movies as well, because indigo and neon yellow just look really good together. For the background picture, I wanted to use a picture of a waterfall, so here's a little fountain with koi in it, which aren't pictured here, from Curtisville, North Carolina. I really love how perfectly she matches the background here. And now, the reveal.
No, the air. It smells grouchy. We might be in for a storm.
I am so happy with how she turned out. She's definitely my favorite from this year's series, and is definitely going to be featured on my year-end art review for this month for sure. I am such a huge fan of the lily pad that is tacked onto the back of her head, and the waterfall skirt I think turned out so good, especially because in my redesign at first it was supposed to go on the front, and I was like, that doesn't look right, and switched it last minute when I was doing the line work to the back. Love it, turned out so great, perfect, no notes, great job me. Moving on to Vidia, always a favorite character. Wanted her to have a very lanky and athletic and spidery sort of body type. For the first look, I wanted to go mostly jock, since I imagine this is pre-exile Vidia. For the second look, I wanted to play up that spiderweb sort of vibe. For the third look, I wanted to go a lot of like tight athletic wear. And for the fourth look, I wanted to reference her iconic ponytail with a big spiderweb shaped cape and lots of like a big V athletic sweater. And then for the final look, I wanted very punk with a lot of boots and this sharp spiky collar, and I came up with the idea for these sort of semi-transparent leg wraps that would really show off the movement of her flying fast, and I really loved that idea. So for the final design here, I am again referencing the colors from last year's, and her total redesign time was 2 hours, 53 minutes, and 34 seconds, and boy, it sure did feel like the majority of that time was spent trying to get the transparencies on the wings right. It wasn't actually, but this was when I say grueling. Anyways, for this final design, I referenced a lot of feathers, and her palette is a lot more saturated and vibrant than it was when I designed her last year, since I imagine this is a young, fresh Vidia who is still respected by her community. So the only hint of spiderwebs in her design is the little heels on the bottom of the shoe, because again, I really love having fun with the shoes of fairies. Since they aren't walking around, they don't need to be practical or realistic at all. For her jacket here, I have it having this spiky thistle blazer cut with elbow pads and feathers at the cuff, and underneath that is an undershirt that is a turtleneck situation with feathers at the top, and an overshirt that is a cutout with mesh of an athletic sweater with these little curls at the bottom near the butt area to give it that sort of pixie vibe, since whenever you add some unnecessary curls to fabric, it always comes off as very elven to me. For her pants, they're these tight, sort of earthy brown colors, almost sort of mauve, with a lot of leather harnesses on the legs that are holding up the weird little leg sheaths, and a little medal, since one of the things I wanted to experiment with here was, okay, what if they like wore medals like differently, like award medals, but they still had the same concept since they visit the human world. So hers is clipped onto her little belt here. Also wanted the calves of the leggings to have this ruching detail. Just add a bit of detail to the legs and draw your eye to it, since while she is not a track star, she's a fast flyer, but calves and legs and that very dynamic sort of runner's pose still has that same sort of visual language of this is a fast character. I really loved getting to draw her pose. It's so like dynamic, and I again was really focused on silhouette for this project because that's one of the things I'm trying to work on this year, and I'm a big fan because in silhouette she really stands out. I also had such a fun time painting her hair. Hair is literally my favorite thing to color and draw, and I really love getting to do the different colored highlights and lowlights for her, and especially because in this design she has so much of it. Going in on the shirt, I have a lot of indigos as the lowlights, whereas on the mauve and purple pieces I use a lot of red highlights to have a bit of conflict within her outfit herself, since she is a character with conflicting motivations. She also has that really big ostentatious feather pinned in at the top of her hair because I wanted her to have something that represents her sort of showboaty nature. And of course, along with the medal, she also has a bag of pixie dust for spare tucked into the other side of her leg belt. And I also have her shoes being made out of this woven purple petal-like material because I wanted to use a lot of sort of more natural fibers in this pre-industrialization Pixie Hollow era. I also realized that she is the reason why I associate the element of air with the color purple, so congrats and shout out to Vidia for fundamentally changing the way I view the world. If you look closely at her forehead, she has these little eensy teensy tiny little dragonfly antennae that match her wings to suit. For the background, I just used a random picture of the sky that I took because fast flying and air talent, and added her purple glow, and then it's time for the reveal.
Tinkerbell, maybe if you spent less time causing disasters, you wouldn't have to help everybody so much.
Whoa.
The truth hurts, doesn't it?
Look! We can use these back at camp. Wow.
And here she is. I'm so happy with how she turned out. I really love how dynamic this pose is and all the harsh lines, and I really love the like clear leg socks that I came up with. Really random idea that just happened to come to me, but I love how it looks. It's very non-human, it's very magical, it's very fast flying because you can just imagine them trailing behind her like a kite as she soars around. But of course, let me know what you guys think. And finally, last but not least, Queen Clarion. For her design, I wanted her mood board to be absolutely filled with royal extravagance. The biggest ball gowns you've ever seen, Elizabethan ruffs, all of the good stuff. For her body type, I wanted to have a very romantic, statuesque sort of look, and a heart-shaped body type, with these very curled, elegant-looking antennae. Each look of hers is a different sort of ball gown style design, and the silhouette I end up going with is very heavily inspired by the fairies from the Spiderwick movie, which never read the books beyond just like the little creature compendium. I love that thing. The bug-like fairy design, top tier, chef's kiss, beautiful. So I wanted her dress to have a lot of different flowery layers, and this line work took 2 copy pages and I had to like paste them together digitally because there was so much detail. I just had to make like this piece ginormous. Likewise, this was also the absolute longest time, taking me 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 8 seconds just to do all of the design and coloring work. For her palette, I wanted to be a mixture of pinks and golds with this royal purple, and I wanted to do pinks and golds in reference to both her movie and her book form designs. And royal purple, since it is, of course, the color most heavily associated with royalty. So there are approximately 1 million billion flowers in this dress. I wanted it to be 3 different petal-like layers with a underskirt that is sort of a trumpet-shaped flower, since again, very royal. And then each layer is a different gradient of royal purple with these magenta, fuchsia, little tiny flowers weaved on, individually hand-sewn. That's what those little X's represent. Just really representing the amount of work and effort that goes into the Queen class. And I also wanted her to have those big charm bracelets there, which, as you can see, have different talent representations of each on each hand, since I always imagined her being less of a queen in the monarch sense and more of a just sort of guidance figure, sort of like a judge or an arbiter or a therapist, there to make a decision and help you with whatever you come to her with. So I wanted each of the charms on her hands to represent different talents. So going on her left hand in a circle, we've got a feather duster for the cleaning talent fairies, a pot for tinker talent fairies, a cloud for storm talent fairies, a pencil for writing fairies, a paintbrush for art fairies, a paw print for animal fairies, a needle for sewing fairies, a water droplet for water talent fairies, a ballet slipper for dance fairies, and a crown for queen talent fairies for health. And then on the other hand, there is a music note for music talent fairies, a star for dust fairies, a pie for baking talent fairies, a pair of binoculars for scout talent fairies, a leaf for flower fairies, a little plus symbol cross for healing talent fairies, a sun for light talent fairies, a pickaxe for mining talent fairies, and a feather for fast flying talent fairies. I love the vast variation of talents available. Back to the rest of her outfit, you'll notice her shoes are little petals that have these little stamens poking out at the ends, and I also made her antennae little stamen shaped as well, that complement the crown and circlet going on her head. I also wanted her big Elizabethan fur ruff, because again I wanted her outfit to be all natural textures, to have this almost sort of Hope Diamond-esque, very dramatic piece of amethyst. I wanted to keep her swallowtail-inspired wings from the movies because I feel like they look very regal, and to increase that regal silhouette, I wanted it to have a every other sort of lace-up corset, because that's very historical, instead of having the modern sort of almost shoelace sort of look to it. I'm also a really big fan of little ribbon garters on her gloves connecting them to her undersleeves as well. Very royal and regal as well. Here, when I'm adjusting the color palettes, it turns very like sunset. I really love the vibrancy. I think it really pulls everything together. For the background, I used a picture of a mirror with some regal looking statues next to it from Kerner's Folly in Kernersville, which is a beautiful historic home. You should definitely go check it out if you're in the area. Lots of history, lots to learn. And now, here is finally, after this whole project, the final reveal.
I know you've all put in months of practice and preparation, but keep up the good work these last few days.
I am so happy with how she turned out, especially as the big final send-off to this year's project. I love the little influence from fairies to royal culture to sunset, very natural looking. I love the organic forms in her outfit the most. But let me know what you guys think. I love how she is very different from any version of Queen Clarion before, but like pulls in aspects from both the movie and book designs. So here are all of my final redesigns for this year in one compilation image. I am so happy with how they all turned out. I love how colorful they're all together. I love the different silhouettes that everyone has. I think they look so fun. Also, fun fact, the meadow in the background is actually the same location as the background photo of last year's, but taken a year after, so that felt very appropriate. I really love how magical this piece feels, and I'm so happy. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you want to see more, what kinds of videos you'd like to see from me in the future. I really enjoy doing redesign videos, but I also really love doing speed paints and talking about original content as well. So let me know what you guys want to see from me in the upcoming year. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this video. And thank you so much, everyone who has done those things. I really appreciate reading all your comments, and be sure to follow me on my Instagram, which is mercreatureguy549. I post a ton of art there, at least 3 times a month, typically more, and lots of little doodles and extras on my story. So I am so glad, and thank you so much for watching to the end. I will see you in the next one. Bye!